We come to you to go through a lot of great content, and I want to personally welcome you. My name is Eric Thompson. I'm the founder of Blueback Health. I started Blueback Health in 2008 with a fundamental belief that everyone deserves a chance to improve. Our team has built bottom-up solutions for employers and employees. We have to have measurable health improvement. We have to have tangible cost savings for businesses. But we also have to be consultative. And we have to have a platform that shows expertise in benefits, wellness, health plan data and analytics, financing, and a passion for authentic and positive change. So we come with solutions and hope to help everyone on their journey to improved health. Today I want to thank our investors, the Blueback Health team. Also, the building we're coming from, where our offices are, Great Blue Research, ZAG Interactive, McKearney Associates. We also have experienced a lot in the last few years, especially the last year. When we look at wellness, we've seen a shift. We've seen a shift from just, stop eating and go running to, hey, what about mental? What about emotional? What about financial well-being? We have to focus on improved habits and realize that not one size fits all. We have to engage the whole person, and we also have to engage the family. We also have to tip our hats to the health and wellness pros that are here today, collectively working together to provide real solutions to folks. And I am so honored and pleased that they would all come here today, join us on this journey, so we tip our hats to them. So here's our lineup. Dr. Matthew Castano, a naturopathic physician. He's going to delve into immediate and purposeful actions that people can take. You're going to learn a lot from Matt, trust me. Also, Doug from McKearney Associates. Doug partners with office design experts to leverage his furniture brands so that they can solve workplace problems, including safety, comfort, productivity, mental well-being. And Shana, good friend of ours, Fitstyle by Shana. Shana's going to go through her certified fitness courses and her Fitstylist programming so that you can see ways for simple wellness in the workplace. We also have Michael Vajant, CEO of Great Blue Research. He's going to unwind critical insight about workplaces. Many of you, did complete the survey that was in part of the invitation, and so there's going to be some very useful information. And then with that, we're going to have a panel conversation. So with that, I am going to turn over to Matt. Matt is a board-certified naturopathic physician, and he's going to go through some candid health, wellness, and impact information, as well as how stress has impacted our body and mind over the past 12 months. So with that, welcome Matt.
Thanks for having me, Eric. My name is Dr. Matthew Castano. I'm a naturopathic physician. I've got a clinic in East Hartford, Connecticut, and East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. I'm a board-certified and licensed naturopathic physician. I've been in practice seeing patients clinically for the last 7 years, and I've had the pleasure of joining Blueback and Eric here to speak to some of the COVID-19 pathophysiology that I've been seeing in practice. So over the last year, I've seen at least a 400% to 500% increase in anxiety and depression within the last 12 months. I've seen that in my patients, I've seen that in family members and friends, and really everybody, both people who have gotten COVID and had the sequelae and the significant issues associated with that, have experienced stress, as well as everybody else who has family members who have had COVID and who've had to have routines change and lifestyle adaptations put into place to be able to wade through this pandemic. What I've seen is parents who have relied on a dual income in order to support their family have to sacrifice one of those incomes to become a full-time teacher at home for their 3 kids. I've seen children learning now virtually from a computer at a critical age where they need to have that social development and environment with their colleagues to learn their identity. And as a consequence, teen suicides are at really an all-time high. Domestic abuse and violence in the home has increased because now you're in close proximity with your significant other for extended periods of time. Leisure activities, going to the gym, exercise. A lot of these businesses have had to close and are no longer offering those types of escapes from the typical daily stressors that people are experiencing. Travel plans, vacations, even traveling outside of state and having to quarantine for 14 days thereafter. We've seen across the board a huge adaptation to these different types of restrictions in our lives, And that then plays into a lot of these mental, physiological, and emotional health consequences that I've been seeing. So I want to talk a little bit about this one axis that I've been seeing time and time again come up in my patients over the last 12 months. It's called the HPA axis. In the brain, we have this gland called the hypothalamus. It's the master regulator of the whole system. It perceives stress in the environment. It lets you know how hungry you are when you haven't eaten for a while. It controls the sleep-wake cycle, handles mental, emotional stress. It has a whole bunch of these different things. Imagine it like the thermometer, basically, of your physiology. That communicates with another gland in the brain called the pituitary. This is the master warehouse of stimulating hormones. The hypothalamus, when it perceives stress, tells the pituitary to then secrete a hormone that talks to these little glands in our back called the adrenals. And these adrenals are responsible for producing a whole bunch of different chemicals, but the one we're going to talk about today is called cortisol. And some people may have heard of cortisol with its association with stress, and it gets a bad reputation because it is associated with stress, but it's incredibly important to help us adapt to whatever we're dealing with. So cortisol tells the liver to bring blood sugar up in the bloodstream when we haven't eaten for a long time. It helps decrease inflammation through our bodies. That's why we get cortisone injections with our golfers or tennis elbow. It helps us focus and ramp up neurotransmitters in the brain that helps us focus, wake up, be productive in the workplace. But what happens is, evolutionarily, we had this system come into place to help us respond to acute stressors. So if we had predation or famine, it would help us get out of that circumstance so that we could then get to a place of safety, and then the cortisol would come back down, and our physiology would be back to status quo. Because this pandemic has affected essentially every aspect of our lives, we've chronically been in a state of stress. And this HPA axis, this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, is constantly firing. And what I've been seeing is that the signal that goes from that pituitary to the adrenal gland to stimulate it to work, the adrenal glands have become essentially burnt out and fatigued. It's the equivalent of you walking into a room and smelling a noxious or smelly smell at first, and then readapting and becoming desensitized to it and no longer noticing the noxious smell. Same exact thing is happening within this system. The adrenals are no longer responding to the signal sent from the pituitary, and then the cortisol that is released attaches to these different receptors throughout the system, and they too are becoming resistant. And so the clinical signs and symptoms that I've been seeing as this adrenal gland can no longer keep up or respond with the appropriate cortisol production is fatigue. Basically, the wick that you have before you lose your cool has become shorter and shorter and shorter. People aren't sleeping as well. Afternoon fatigue typically crashes around 2-3 p.m. in the afternoon, potentially even body aches and pains that have increased over time. And so I think, as a community, as this pandemic starts to change and we do are allowed to get back to the workplace and the work environment, as employers, we have a responsibility to help our employees basically get this HPA axis back online and decrease the mental emotional stress that they've been experiencing during this time span. So I created 3 actionable kind of categories that we can kind of put into place. The first being routine visits. So this past year, the ability to see your PCP, your gynecologist, or your endocrinologist, cardiologist, gastroenterologist, all these different chronic disease doctors has become very difficult. Not only has their hours become more limited, appointments have been pushed out. The vast majority of my patients have not seen these routine visits happen as often. Another aspect is, as they come back to the office, allowing a safe space and HR resources like a therapist for people to be able to talk with. Did they experience domestic abuse or violence during this pandemic? Having those resources available and allotting time for them to be able to get back to those routine visits, very important. Secondly, and I think this is the one that's most important, is prevention. Now more than ever, we've seen that this COVID-19 pandemic has affected the individuals who have higher degrees of inflammation, comorbidities, obesity. So putting into place different preventative techniques to make sure that they have healthy, robust immune systems, very important. So there's 4 different kind of subcategories within this. Firstly, diet. There's so much misinformation out there as to what constitutes a healthy diet. Having resources available to employees to be able to have professional nutrition advice, something from a functional healthcare practitioner or a naturopath, some type of resource so individuals can consume a healthy diet that provides the vitamins, minerals, and appropriate caloric load that they need to lead a healthy life. Secondly, physical activity. I've seen two different spectrums. I've seen the COVID-19, 19 pounds that people have gained over the last 12 months, and I've also seen people take this opportunity during this pandemic to get outside and exercise. But I think it becomes very important from an employee worksite setting to place an emphasis on making sure that people are getting 30+ minutes of activity at least 5 times a week. And really, from a stress reduction standpoint, the release of endorphins from exercise circumvents really any medication that we have available. So diet, exercise, sleep is a huge one. One of the benefits of COVID-19 and working predominantly from home is the fact that it has allowed people to be able to get 8 hours of sleep, which is critical for the healthy, proper functioning of the immune system, for losing weight, for proper metabolic signals, even neurotransmitter production that helps you focus. Really, sleep should be the core foundation with rebalancing that HPA axis dysfunction that I talked about. And lastly, working with a functional healthcare practitioner or a naturopathic physician to take it one step further than just running the typical cholesterol panel that's collected on most blood work. We've seen a huge impact of vitamin D levels. There was a study done about a year ago, I believe in May, in Indonesia that looked at vitamin D status in individuals who had COVID and died and who had COVID and survived. And when 4 different aspects were controlled for, age, gender, obesity, and historical pulmonary complications, the individuals who were clinically vitamin D deficient had a 10 times greater risk of dying from COVID than individuals who had sufficient vitamin D levels. So going beyond just this conventional blood work to look at nutrient levels, to see how the thyroid is functioning, to look at the immune system function is vitally important, because that's going to be the canary in the coal mine before any downstream comorbidities or chronic diseases exist. And lastly, if it's possible to allow a hybrid type model or the ability for employees to work remotely, from the patients that I've spoken with, many are excited to get back to the work environment, but across the board, to have the laterality of being able to have a couple days per week where they can work remote and continue to foster the relationships that they now have with their kids and their significant others, to sleep in and potentially save the commute time that they would have to the office. If that capacity is available, I think that is something that's worthwhile investing in. And ensuring that when they do come back to the office, that the environment is clean. That's really something that I've seen time and time again when I've polled patients. They want a clean environment, they want their workstations sanitized, they want to make sure that there's some type of structure in place, whether people have gotten the COVID-19 vaccination and it becomes mandatory, or a majority of people have it. There needs to be a sense of feeling safe when they come back. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to be able to have your employees take an anonymous survey and see where they specifically fall on that spectrum. So that pretty much wraps it up for what I have.
So I have a couple simple questions for
Sure.
you, Matt. One thing that you and I have done work together on, and also our employer clients are now asking for alternatives to telemedicine is expanding greatly with the number of professional resources available, specialists. We've also done some of Matt's work on a virtual basis with clients that have wanted it, because a lot of employees are demanding something a little bit different. And when I say different, when I look at your practice, one thing that I've learned with you is when we dug into my blood panel, which my PCP, who I go to my annual physicals, fully supports. It was a collaborative. I learned a lot more about really my blood panel, my blood health, and my doctor supported it, but I'd never gone through that with a primary care physician. So when you look at going through a blood panel, what are a couple of the things that are really key indicators for you that may be triggering mood, depression, and also ability to either maintain or lose weight?
That's an awesome question. So most conventional physicians, as part of an annual exam, run 3 main tests. A CBC to look at red blood cells, white blood cells, and your basically immune function. Mm-hmm. They look at a lipid panel to look at your cholesterol values, and they look at something known as a CMP to make sure that your kidneys are functioning well and liver is functioning well. As long as you fall within the normal reference range there, you can survive typically until the next appointment. The problem is that it misses a lot of things that can run in the background and begin to develop subclinically. So in my practice, I take it significantly further. I run a thyroid hormone to be able to see what the capacity of the metabolism is, how much energy you can produce, how many hormones you can produce. Thyroid is vitally important for that. I run, as I mentioned, vitamin D status and have been doing since the start of practice. I practice in New England. If you're listening to this and you're in New England, most everybody across the board has deficiencies in 3 different nutrients. Vitamin D, we don't get enough sunlight. Magnesium, our soils are largely depleted with magnesium, and so those levels come back low. And omega-3s, which are the anti-inflammatory fats that we predominantly get from fish. So as a knee-jerk reaction, across the board, I run those levels, and they're vitally important. Magnesium helps with energy production. Deficiencies have been associated with sleep disorders, anxiety, migraines, depression, musculoskeletal cramps and pains. It's amazing how many individuals who are put on high blood pressure medications when they actually just have a magnesium deficiency. And lastly, omega-3s. They're anti-inflammatory fats that pretty much affect you from head to toe. They protect your brain from getting dementia, Alzheimer's. They protect your cardiovascular system, reduce the risk of having cardiovascular disease, which is the #1 killer in the United States. So these are a couple of the nutrients that I run beyond the typical panel. But great question. You can certainly take it a number of steps further to really be kind of more proactive and look for canaries in the coal mine before they overtly manifest.
And so with that, I personally have done that, and we have seen it with other, employees of companies that have given us, feedback on the value of going deeper into their blood panel. Lots of times people also say, well, how's that going to get paid for? Because, a naturopathic physician's generally not part of the network, and that's true. However, what I found is when I want to go into that deeper blood panel, which I've done with Dr. Castano, I've gone to my primary care physician, and many of those tests, when I've asked him to also put it on my lab request, my insurance carrier has covered it. Doesn't mean it always will be the case, but when we look at unbundling it, that is where I think that there are definitely a higher level understanding of what your blood really does look like and things that we can do to improve it. And I've seen those improvements personally, so a little bit of a testimonial. So thanks, Matt. I know we're going to have some more information and some great conversation coming up in the panel discussion, which with the panel conversation, whether you're on YouTube or Zoom, you can put questions in the chat function. And we hope to get to as many of those as we can, and if not, we'll be sure to send answers or responses to those questions after the event. Also, when Doug comes on, he's going to be ultimately raffling off a couple cool items, and all we need is for you to put in your month and day of birth in the chat functions. And then after the event, we will announce what criteria we use to pick the winner. So, with that, let's go have some fun. Let's take a virtual tour down to Hickory, North Carolina, to Darran Furniture. We're going to visit with Jennifer and Jeff, family-owned business that started in 1977. Darran Furniture manufactures a wide range of office furniture, including the Honey Workspace collection that we have here today. And we want to thank all of the team down at Darran and Jennifer and Jeff for taking the time to make this video and also helping put some of that product in our showroom office space here today. So sit back, relax, let's take a visit and go into the human side of office furniture.
Darran, a place where quality, collaboration, and innovation matter. Hi, I'm Jennifer Cashin, President at Darran.
And I'm Jeff Hollinsworth, Vice President of Sales at Darran. We are a second-generation brother and sister team. And I grew up around the factory known as the SOB, the son of boss, and now I'm the BOB, brother of boss.
Our father, Randy Hollingsworth, started the company in 1977 with a friend and 12 employees. Today, we have grown to 3 manufacturing facilities that produce more than 40 furniture collections in High Point, North Carolina. We proudly manufacture all of our products in the USA using a built-to-order manufacturing concept. This allows us the flexibility to modify products to suit a customer's needs. Every piece is built and inspected at 5 different stations during manufacturing. With our 100% inspection process, you can trust that every piece of furniture you receive is the best quality. We source 75% of our raw materials from less than 100 miles of our manufacturing facilities in High Point. All veneers are hand-selected, allowing for better control of the material, quality, and appearance. Products are packed by hand in our plant and shipped with dedicated furniture carriers that ensure they arrive safely for installation.
Our project designers are equipped with 2020 technology, CET, Revit, and AutoCAD software to serve our dealers and design firms better. The designers can provide quotes, drawings, and renderings for projects, turning the customer's ideas from vision into reality.
I work closely with sales and design to understand the market demand and the product challenges within our industry. We are fortunate to have built strong relationships with some of the best product designers across the globe.
During Honey's design phases, Cassie and I conducted focus groups with over 50 design firms across the country. We wanted to know exactly what kind of product they were looking for. The feedback was positive from the beginning, so we knew we had something special. Now, not only are productivity and efficiency important, but also worker safety and comfort. Honey is the perfect solution to return to work because it offers 55-inch high panels for user privacy and provides 75 inches between workers. One of the key attributes is the user's ability to choose a range of work styles, lounge, desk height, or standing height, which support private, open, and collaborative zones. The entire system is elevated to allow for better air quality and heat dissipation from both people and equipment. Honey can also reduce stress, enhance clarity of thought, creativity, and overall improve a person's mental and physical well-being through the 120-degree biophilic design. As employees focus more on their career, calmness, serenity, and healthy living can be a challenge to achieve. Research suggests incorporating natural elements are more appealing and have marked health benefits.
During our design journey, we passed all of the input absorbed from the focus groups to the product designers, Mark Mueller and Christopher Wright. Honey has been in development since 2018. Customers are now looking for products to help them get back to work safely and products that are more organic and unique. Honey checks all of those boxes.
With more than 40 years in business, we have proudly refined and cultivated our craft into who we are today. As needs are quickly changing, we consistently strive to evolve and look ahead to the future of furniture design and solutions.
To learn more about us, please visit Darran.com. And to see projects that we've completed, please visit our installs page. Thank you for visiting with us today.
Have to apologize for the folks on Zoom. You didn't have any volume. We will be emailing out and making available that video. So sorry for that. Folks on YouTube were able to hear it, so please accept our apologies for that glitch. But next up, we're going to go and talk to office furniture expert Doug Kruse, and he's also going to introduce Shana Schneider, who's a Fitstylist. The physical workspace is shifting. The employee experience matters in the workplace. We need to drive innovation, critical thinking, and organizational culture. Employees, we have to give them an inviting work environment so they feel safe, happy, engaged. We have to increase our customer service to our clients. We just talked a little bit about mental well-being, and the physical workspace impacts our mental well-being and our work performance. It enhances our productivity. It fosters employee retention. So first up, we're going to go and talk to Doug. And Doug's going to show some of the design features of Honey, remark on the giveaways, and also comment on some of the products that are important to be putting into the workplace which help the employee feel comfortable, safe, and engaged. So I'm going to turn it over to Doug. Let's go.
Thank you, Eric. First off, I just want to take a few moments and thank everybody for being a part of today's program. We really, really do appreciate it. Let's call a spade a spade. It's been a really tough challenge this year for a lot of people, some more than others. That said, the best thing that we can come out of this with is the fact people are becoming a little bit more engaged out in the real world and inevitably will be returning back to the office. So, we had the good fortune of having the opportunity to see Jeff and Jen Hollingsworth. They are the creators, the manufacturers, the designers between the product that we have here to the left. The interesting thing about Honey was the fact that it really wasn't designed for that return to work application. But the best thing about Honey is it could not have come at a more appropriate time. Let me take you into the product and show you a little bit about what I mean. Take the panel, for instance. We've designed it at 55 inches high. One of the predominant reasons for doing that is to let the natural light come into the office. Also, if you look at the profile of the panel, it mirrors the airplane wing. It's the only panel in the market that has this style to it. Most panels are rectilinear, square, hard, metal top caps, quite honestly, cold. Our panel, however, with the fabric characteristics of it, does have a nice little warm, inviting feel to it. We've taken that concept and carried out the design all the way through the radius two-way corner post, as well as over here on the three-way. As you enter into the workspace, you feel incredibly comfortable. What we have done with the honeycomb concept is done a 120 radius all the way around. The space is engaging, not to mention I'm not feeling claustrophobic by any stretch of the imagination, and I feel ample space to be able to work throughout the day. The other design inherent features we have is we raised the entire system off of the floor 5 inches. Why did we do that? We wanted to increase airflow circulation. By doing such, enabled us to take that into consideration. In the office furniture industry, we always encourage movement. So Darran incorporated the height adjustable surface inside the Honey product. As you can see, when I raise the button, the surface is raised. Not only do the surfaces raise, but so do the shrouds behind. It's a very cool design feature, allowing us to use the 55-inch high panel, but in the up position, it creates a nice, convenient space for me to work, let alone feel safe. The individual on the opposite side feels safe, and the individual over here, if indeed they want to raise their work surfaces up or down, also creates safety in the workplace. Pretty cool little feature. When doing such, the monitor is as well raised. So what we want to do is incorporate a very simple way for the user to be able to height adjust the mechanisms. How do we do that? We introduce ESI. Their monitor arms here behind, simple to install and very, very simple to use. Just finger touch controls, raise it up, raise it down. We can also slide it left and slide it right. Pretty simple. While I'm here, I definitely want to bring some attention to the power hub that we have on top of the work surface. Easy access, plug in your do-sep receptacles, as well as the USB ports. In addition to that, I want to highlight the Lily light. This too, from ESI, will be able to will enable the person working at the station to focus light exactly where they might need it. So if you remember, Eric had mentioned beforehand that we need to put your name and, no, actually not your name, just your birthday and date. And what we're going to do is with the closest person to the date that we are going to choose will win the monitor arm, the power hub, as well as the Lily light. One more thing before I close, I just want to bring some attention to the panels that we have on the wall. Sometimes when you introduce lower panels, acoustics can be a problem. With our panels that we have up here, acoustic tiles by Fabric Images, we can help solve a lot of those issues. This is one solution of several. So if you have acoustic issues, please reach out to us, let us come in, take a look at the product, and see if we can't find that solution for you. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Shana. Shana's coming into the workstation to show you how to stay fit and healthy while you're at work. Thank you very much.
So Shana's coming in. Come on in, Shana. I want to just let you know that Shana's going to demonstrate some real-life solutions to incorporate movement in well-being in the workplace. And so with that, we're going to go to Shana.
I am delighted to be here. So again, I'm Shana Schneider. I'm the founder of Fitstyle by Shana and an approach called Fitstyle Your Life. You've heard now about how important it is to bring wellness, movement into our everyday life. And so some of those challenges that we see are really about where do we have the time to do it? And especially as we move back into the office, we're thinking about how exactly does that work? And Fitstyle is really about helping you create this mindset shift, because what I want you to do is kind of let your mind go from that typical idea of exercise being kind of let's sweat it out and having to be all together in a set amount of time. Instead, we can break it up into different parts throughout our day. And the goal really needs to be movement throughout the day. And in fact, just simply being in this space, this lovely furniture from Darran definitely gives me some great ideas, and I'm going to share those with you. So what I'd like to do is give you 3 kind of Fitstyle fundamentals for you to take away to really think about how you can bring fitness into your everyday life. So first is to start where you are with good posture. So while you're watching this, I'm actually going to invite you to do this right now with me. I like to call it a little Fitstyle check-in. So top of the head reaches for the ceiling. I'm going to ask you to just give a little shoulder roll here and then take a deep breath. And just with that, you've already started to kind of open up the chest, bringing in that oxygen that's going to give you that energy to keep moving. And something simple like that you can bring into maybe the opening of an agenda, just putting it on there to remind your staff members how to bring that wellness into their everyday. The second fundamental is to take a stand. Now, this is both literal and figurative, because I'm sure some of you may have heard, sitting is the new smoking. So we really want to find ways to stand up more and take a stand. And again, here I am in a perfect location to do that. And so the more we can find these opportunities to stand up, the better. And one little tip, something I like to share with a lot of clients that I work with, and we incorporate this into some of the culture, is thinking about having a standing meeting. So as a little cue, anytime you have one of those meetings that's kind of every day in your week, maybe you can consider making that a standing meeting. And the last fundamental, actually, that I'm going to share is about exhale. But because we want to give you as much good info as possible, one other thing to just simply think about when you're taking a stand and thinking about moving is to also notice if you can maybe take some walk and talks. Now, while you may not be together, that could certainly be something that you can do with colleagues, in that you can be in separate locations and have that headset and be able to walk and talk. Or as we come back to the office, that's a great opportunity to get outside. So you can set an agenda item and have that be the topic of discussion and get in those steps. Now, the third fundamental that I'd like to share with you is exhale, right? So exhale, sometimes we think about just as breath, but I want you to think about it as movement as we take into consideration stretching. It's so important, a great release as we're working every day, because we start to feel it in our neck and in our hips and our lower back. And this is something that you can easily bring into your culture. It does not need to be a full-on yoga class. You do not need to get on the floor. So I'm going to show you right now just a couple quick stretches that you can do, and I'll invite you to do them with me too. So just a simple head tilt, just bringing your ear over your shoulder, something simple like this. And you want to do that on each side. And just quickly, I'm going to show you. And what you'd want to do is just hold that for 3 to 5 deep breaths. Something just like that. Nice. And one other, this one I love. Everyone feels so good with this one. So while you're seated, right, you're just going to go ahead and cross your foot over your knee right here, and you're just doing a seated hip stretch. You might feel that opening in your hip. It helps to release some tension in that lower back. And this doesn't look like anything, out of the ordinary. So it's a great stretch to do not only at home, but also in the office, right? We want to be able to create that culture so that people feel comfortable to move and stretch, because we want them to be able to be focused, energized, and productive. So with that, just a quick recap of those fundamentals, right? Start where you are with that good posture, take a stand, and also remember to exhale. So we have all kinds of programming to help you bring this into your workplace, and of course, so much more content for you now too.
Wonderful. Thanks, Shana. I can tell you, when Shana and I meet, usually in New Haven where she's based, we always have standing meetings. We also do walking meetings. And because she knows New Haven better than the back of her hand, I can tell you it is an enjoyable time, and I learn a lot as we spend time working on things. And some of what we also work on is we have some of Shana's programming inside of our wellness programs. So a number of our clients take advantage of what she does and has already done, whether it be daytime or evening, virtual classes, live. I can tell you it's a joy to work with you, Shana, so thank you. Next up, we're going to meet with Mike Vijant, owner, CEO of Great Blue Research. A few years ago, Mike told me he had bought the building that we're in, where our offices are, and pestered me long enough to say, move out of Hartford, come here, because we're going to do some pretty cool things. And so you've been right. And so with that said, the great thing is what we're going to do right now is, many of you did complete that online survey questionnaire, and we're going to unpack that today, because market research and understanding what is top of mind for employees, for employers, when we look at critical thinking and within an employer making decisions, more now than ever, employers need to listen to their employees. They may not always accept everything that's desired, but Michael's always going to tell you as an employer some things that he's had to better understand and react to keep his talented team at the table. So with that, Michael, let's go.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate everyone's time today. And as Doug said, thanks everyone for being here. Part of what we do at Great Blue is really just understanding the human experience and understanding what's happening with respect to data inside the workplace, data inside the customer experience, what's going on, and obviously COVID impacted that in a major way. Data that I saw last week, 26% of Americans have had at least one of their COVID shots, with up to 90% anticipated having both shots by midsummer. Really, in many ways, projecting a late summer return to many offices, and you've heard from Dr. Matt and from Doug and from Shana, all the different things that can be happening. And just looking at some news, Viacom, some large organizations looking to have some employees returning by July 4th or shortly thereafter. AT&T bringing folks back late summer. Citigroup with the goal of having 30% of their employees working back by summer. And I thought importantly, or interestingly, the Partnership of New York had a survey as well that said 45% of Manhattan's 1 million office workers will be back at their office by September. So when we built this survey for you, and we'll go to the first slide that really walks through some of what we were looking to uncover. For those of you that didn't have the opportunity to take the survey, please, by all means, feel free to do so. We will continue to stay on top of this data. But really what we wanted to understand was, what were some of the employee workplace locations, both pre-COVID and I don't say post-COVID, but before COVID began and where we're at kind of now as of March 21 is really when we started the survey. We wanted to understand folks' level of comfort with working physically in office as compared to working from home, and we'll share some data in terms of what folks are thinking and where they're looking and what their comfort levels are. Opinions on the impact of COVID-19 on both employee health, and we address this both mentally as well as physically. So I was excited to talk with Dr. Matt and his take on what he was seeing in both of those areas, and he touched upon a little bit of that earlier. How impact of COVID-19 on current and future hiring decisions, as well as the biggest concerns for business owners and what they have in 2021. So as we move on to this next slide, you'll see pretty quickly that in our data set, we had a really nice mix of folks from a respondent standpoint. We saw about 43% of our sample base represented companies in that 0 to 49 category. I was also excited to see that about 26% of our sample also represented some really large companies, so that was great. We also wanted to identify if they were an employee having decisions made for them, or if they were an employer making those decisions. And we saw in our sample set about 83% were employees, 17% on the employer side. Continuing along onto our next slide, we also see from a working location, on the left side of your screen, we saw kind of where folks were working physically pre COVID in a physical brick and mortar location. We saw about 82% were in that physical location versus now we see that same percentage only 26% of the time. So big changes. We're going to dive a little deeper into what we're seeing and a good mix of in terms of office space, shared space, individual office, as well as a combination of those. So continuing along, on to our next slide. We also saw, despite what you might hear, most employees are actually comfortable coming back to the office. On the right side of our screen there, you see about 64% of folks that are returning to a work location or have returned to a work location are reporting some level of comfort with being in office. I think important to note, though, there's still 27% or so that are not comfortable or have some level of concern. So as employers, we also need to be very mindful of what's on folks' minds, what we're learning, and having that conversation with them. Moving on to our next slide here. When we look at 6 months from now and thinking out over the next 6 months, what are folks looking for and where do they want to be working and where do they think predominantly they will be? We see about 41% believe that they'll predominantly be in office. We see 22% say some equal combination of in office and or work from home. Dr. Matt talked about it. If there is those couple of opportunities, 1 or 2 days a week, where it makes sense. To have folks work from home. There's obviously those benefits that do that. We see about 30% believe they will continue to work from home in a total work from home environment. 7% falling in the don't know, unsure. To spend a quick second on the don't know, unsure, as we're talking to our folks, typically we see don't knows or unsure responses. If folks aren't really sure where they're going to be, we see those numbers 15, 20%. To see such a small number in this sample really represents that folks have a pretty strong plan on what they're going to do. So important note there. Okay, moving back to our slides. COVID impact on employee health. On the left side here, we see 24% reported some sort of negative impact on their mental health as a result of COVID. On the right side of the screen here, you see 13.5% represented a negative impact on their physical health. So as has been talked about here a lot today by all of our professionals, the mental aspect of what's happening requires having those opportunities to have conversations, not only with your employees, but they also having a safe place to have conversations with HR or some sort of therapy in nature. Okay, a couple more slides here for you, and then we'll jump into the panel side of the equation. As we look at budget allocations for remote workers, it's kind of all over the place, and are folks making budgets available? While you see that there's a good mix of budgets are not being allocated or they are, it is something that as employers, the data is really showing strongly that we need to be thinking about that. If folks are going to work from home and if we're going to reduce costs in the physical space, what are going to be the adjustments? Obviously, there's things such as data privacy and HIPAA and all those sorts of things that we need to be mindful of as folks go from home. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Also, allocations for in-office workers. We see about 63% of our businesses said, yes, we are in fact allocating budget to bring in some safe working environments and equipment related to keeping folks socially distant and or apart from one another. Okay, moving on to our next slide here. Top priorities for employee wellness. When we just flat out ask folks, what are the most important aspects related to mental and physical well-being that you want to see at the work site? And this was not a plant, but it just literally worked out this way that worksite wellness programs were being thought of by 44% of our population. Offering a worksite wellness program for the first time by 19%. So you're well over 63% of folks say continue or offer that worksite wellness program. About 17% said, hey, let's leave it up to our staff. We don't want to start forcing things on them. I think Shana did a great job today of saying, hey, here's some ways that you can engage in this type of behavior without it being forced on for you. All right, next slide. So just in kind of wrapping it up here, the data was pretty clear. It showed us that we need to offer some worksite wellness programs. We need to invest in employees' mental wellness, flexible workplace environments, and I will tell you personally for the folks at Great Blue, before we came back to our office, and we're kind of set up in such a way where we have a great deal of space so we can spread folks out. But one of the first things we did was host a joint Zoom meeting with a psychologist, and we had everybody come onto that meeting and share what our thoughts, our concerns, our fears were, and leadership went to work and created a plan to address those. So thanks to everybody for having us, and Eric, we'll turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michael. That was, I always get excited with data, and so when Michael and I are able to do some work together, the numbers talk to me, maybe a twisted little side of my personality, but they do talk to me. And so I think when we look at what Michael just unpacked, we are finding our employer clients, when we are crafting health insurance benefits for them and we look at wellness, there is a connection. And our data analytics allow us to crosswalk that and see that there is actually measurable impact. Lots of times that I would say, oh, you can't measure wellness, but I can tell you a year later from the beginning of this pandemic, employers want to have conversations about wellness. We have those solutions. We're also excited to be rolling out a wellness program through the Chambers here in Connecticut that launches May 1st. And then we also have a program that any employer can join into called Blue Chip 21, which is our wellness program for those that may want to just dip their toe in versus having a custom program, and that's going to launch on July 1. So I think the data supporting kind of our actions, Michael, I really appreciate you bringing that to the table and letting your staff do that work. So with that, we're going to turn it over to the panel. So we have our panelists here. We've heard from Dr. Castano. We've heard from Doug, Shana, Michael. Now let's combine these talents, and we're going to discuss some of the hottest topics that are top of mind for many employers and employees. So I have some questions first that we have. Again, as a reminder, on the raffle, if you put in either on YouTube or Zoom your month and day of birth, we have some cool office items that we're going to raffle off after the event. And I'm also fortunate because all of the cool stuff Doug has, I have right here in 20 Western Boulevard, so I'm a guinea pig. And I can tell you it's some really fun stuff, and it does impact my mental well-being. So with that said, the first question is social wellness. It's another commonly overlooked aspect of employee wellness, social wellness. More and more employers are becoming increasingly aware of the consequences of loneliness in the workplace. Strong work relationships and opportunities for social connection are essential for employee job satisfaction, happiness, overall well-being. Lonely employees are more likely to feel disconnected from their jobs, which can lead to disengagement and lower work performance. What are your suggestions in combating this aspect of wellness at a time when we are encouraged to keep some distance? I'm going to turn to Matt first. Matt, are your patients wanting to come back to the office?
So, good question. I've seen pretty much everything on the spectrum. I've had patients come to see me and they can't wait for the day to go back. They can't spend another day at home with their husband or wife. Their kids are too much. And so they crave that social connection again. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I have patients tell me that they've been practicing for this pandemic their entire lives. They're introverts by nature and they enjoy being at home. But evolutionarily, we're social creatures. The worst possible outcome that could have happened in a tribal community was being ostracized. So ingrained within us is this craving for social connection. And so I genuinely believe that the vast, vast, vast majority of employees do want to re-engage in a social environment and come back to work, so long as they feel safe and comfortable.
Great. Let's turn it over to Doug. Doug, what are some of the easiest worksite modifications that you're seeing employers asking for or discussing to keep distance but also be able to engage with coworkers?
Eric, I think the easiest word is not always so easy. However, to take a look at it, I think first and foremost it's the communication from the employer to the employee. All right, what are they going to experience when they walk back into the new workplace environment? Signage is also probably one of the most simplest things that they can do in order to direct traffic and maintain social distancing. From a furniture standpoint, might be a little bit more complicated, there's a little bit more programming involved, And that's why we do encourage the employer to reach out to your health or to your furniture professional and allow us to come in sooner than later to assist with that redesign work.
And I've seen that, Doug, and as you share with me how your manufacturers are ramping up, call it retrofits or so on. We go to restaurants, we see plexiglass and so on, and some of the worksite modification products that you now have access to are not expensive, but important relative to the things that we've talked about. So I get that. Michael, I know we just went through the data, and I think you're seeing that employers do want their employees back in the office, right?
Absolutely. There's a collaboration that takes place, particularly in our business. We're deep thinkers, right? So it's not just pages and pages of data. We need to really sit around the table and understand what it means. And our project managers need to be working with our data analysts, and we need to be thinking about how it's impacting. And I think to Doug's point as well, I think a big element that is underrepresented is the communication with employees. When folks want that community and the ability to come in, it's also when you get back in that environment, it's having the conversation that if someone forgets to put their mask on, it's not a negative thing. There's friendly reminders. So even in the adaptation of going back into the workplace where you have mask criteria and when we take them off and when we leave them on, but just making it not a negative thing. If it's a friendly reminder, we've communicated over and over again. It's the message, not the delivery. And that if we're reminding, it's just a simple we forgot as opposed to going against the grain and I'm just not wearing them or making a statement.
Wonderful. And Shana, your company, Fitstyle by Shana, you have had clients where you're doing work inside the work setting. You also have clients that they pay for their employees to do some of your walking tours, and that's all changed. So what's changed with your programming?
Yeah. So everything at this point is all online. So making things available via live stream, also recorded videos. And, we're talking about that social connection and, it's utilizing the tools that we have now to build that connection. So if that means it's virtual right now. I have to say that I actually just got an email that I think really articulates what can come from having these kinds of inclusive live stream kind of events. So one of my clients, we host regular stretch breaks. So maybe there's a 30-minute stretch class or a 30-minute, I call it a stretch snack, or a 15-minute stretch snack. And she was saying that not only do they get the tools for recognizing how to release the tension, but being able to see each other online and kind of that reconnecting that in some cases they might not have actually seen each other for months, maybe even a whole year, has really been something that's been really powerful. So I think using those tools right now, even though we say, oh, even though you're online, do you still get that kind of connection? I think the answer is yes, if you're providing content that's really accessible and also can just be fun, because we can even do walking online.
That's great. I think the next question, coming up is when we look at employee stress and mental health, they affect every area of business across all sectors. Mental health is reflected daily in morale, productivity, engagement, customer satisfaction, and ultimately burnout. Nearly every emotional health crisis emerges when an individual's coping mechanisms are inadequate. An overwhelming theme that we're seeing in the past year is that the work-life integration, so many of us are seeing where working where we live and struggling to balance, a full-time job has been putting us in an upside-down position. I'm going to turn first to Matt. Matt, when you look at this, and you talked about it, but what are some of the most immediate health consequences that are occurring when employees work in an environment that adds stress and they don't feel safe? And is it important for the employer to rethink their office design features in this regard?
Yeah, absolutely. I talked about this earlier with the HPA axis dysfunction. With that cortisol level running awry in the system, and one that I didn't talk about, adrenaline, during times of that fight or flight response when you're not feeling safe, it clouds your judgment, clouds your brain, you become distracted, you can't think straight, and we see that productivity comes down. So placing an emphasis on ensuring that when employees come back to the environment they are feeling very safe is crucial. I do think that one of the best things that we've talked about today is the design furniture by Honey. I polled patients, and a lot of them have said, when I come back to that work environment, I want to feel socially distanced, but I still crave that sense of community. So fostering that type of environment is doubly important.
Wonderful. I think, we talk a lot about Honey. Honey is an example of what I think is kind of the workplace of tomorrow, but it's happening today, which is I want to have more of my own space. I want an engagement area where I can be, mentally engaged and feel safe. So, I'm going to turn to Doug. We've gone through this over the past number of years where employers have been reducing the footprint that an employee can work in, and then they took that into, hey, hoteling is great. We can just put a bunch of tables out and a locker where you can throw your pens in when you leave during the day, but you come in or leave at night, and you can come in and sit down wherever you want. Is that changing now, Doug?
Yeah, I actually do. I think that it's changing considerably. There for a while was a very popular way of approaching to the open collaboration, more of a benching application, more of kind of touchdown stations. Do I feel that that is 100% going away? I really don't. I believe it is going to be minimized to a degree, but even those organizations that have gone to that concept, many manufacturers have come back to adapt those particular workstation scenarios with divider screens, with mobile units to divide spacing, acrylics, so on and so forth. So will it go away 100%? Probably not, but I do see it diminishing a bit.
Wonderful. And then Shana, one thing we didn't really touch on, but you do a lot of work in mindfulness. And so when we look at that, what are some of the most immediate and simple actions an employer or employee can take relative to simple mindfulness to reduce stress and kind of reset?
Well, I think one of the things is to really have that mindset shift, to recognize that exercise and that wellness doesn't have to happen after work, right? Because I think, you had mentioned at the beginning that, it's that work-life balance. I think I take more of an approach where we think about it as harmony, because it's all happening at the same time. And so some of the kind of immediate things to think about are bringing in these kinds of experiences, classes that employees can take during the workday, incorporating these kinds of tips that you can do during a meeting. As I had mentioned, if you're putting together an agenda and just putting a couple bullet points at the top, reminding people to drink water, take a breath, and decide if they consider stand for the meeting. Simple reminders like that can go a long way because it also helps them know that you are caring about them, the person, and not just the work being done.
So finally on this question, Michael, when we look at mental well-being, where is that on the employer's list? What does the survey show?
I think where it was on the list pre-COVID, where it is on the list right now is a complete inverted response or action. I think most importantly, to Shana's points and to some of the others as well, is as we go through this process, as you're going through what the place is going to look like afterwards, there is a need to find a common ground, a benchmark where everybody agrees on a set of core actions. From there, because you will have people that are on polar sides of the spectrum, and we had some of that. And so once we found a common ground that everybody agreed to, then we could work to with our employees to figure out what exactly they needed to feel safe. They were a part of the solution. It resulted in some equipment being added to the company. It resulted in some signage, but it also just resulted in some reminders, as Shana mentioned, to some common sense type behaviors that we just need to remind each other of. So I think the big thing that employers really need to understand is you've got to talk to your employees before they come back. You've got to understand a set of criteria that they're looking for, and this is what I'm seeing across all of our clients that are asking these types of questions. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It is a combination of what works for your team, but most importantly is finding that common benchmark where you all agree and then work from there.
Great. Thank you. I think what we're going to do now is being mindful of time, and we might go a little bit over the 11:30 stop, but we have a few questions that we've had come in from the audience. And so one of the first question is, someone asked the question, made the statement, I feel like I've been chronically stressed and exhausted for a year now. What's the key to me getting my energy back up? And that was directed to you, Matt.
So there's probably 3 big things that I'd recommend. Talked about this a little bit earlier. Sleep is huge. Getting at least 7.5 hours of sleep plus a night will help to restore some of that adrenal burnout axis that I talked about. Eating a healthy diet. Now, I've got patients who come to me on a vegan diet, and I've got patients who come to me eating a carnivorous diet where they only eat meat and everything in between. But if you were to take, 3 broad strokes of how to improve the diet, nix the junk food, nix the soda, and get rid of the processed food. Across the board, I think any dietary regimen that you follow, they'll all agree that those aren't good. And then the last one, some physical activity. I typically recommend 30 minutes at least, 5+ times a week. Get out, move, whether that's in a gym, outside, even a brisk walk. Especially when it comes to a reduction in stress, the best antidepressant drug is endorphins that you naturally release from exercise. So if at least you advocate those 3 things, I think we can see a definite reduction in the stress and anxiety a lot of us have experienced this past year.
Excellent. Another question that came in, comment was, the Honey line of furniture looks amazing. We thank you for that. I know Darran does too. So when we look at what's a realistic time to implement change with furniture, Doug, and then also are you seeing where more, and the other question is, are employers buying product for the employee's home, working from home?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The manufacturing time frame of honey is actually quite quick. So you might want to just expect maybe 4 to 5, 5 to 7 weeks, something of that nature for the manufacturing process. That's the quick side of things. The programming side of the equation takes a little bit more time. We would need to bring in the professionals. We would need to take a look at the footprint of the particular environment. Some companies are larger, some are smaller. So just depending on the complexity of the organization, the amount of employees that they have, so on and so forth. I would again encourage, as I mentioned earlier, for employers to reach out sooner than later. I do feel that the office environment is going to be coming back towards the tail end of this year, and personally, I hope it really excels in 2021 as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Doug. This question came in for Blueback Health and Shana. Do you come to offices and workplaces, and how would we engage you to help jumpstart our team when we do return to the office? For our part, when we look at our wellness programming and understanding what the health plan has and how that might integrate, and if there are resources available from some of these insurance companies, which they do provide to us, sometimes we can mitigate some of that cost. But what we traditionally do is when we look at defining success and programming for it, we then look to our technology platform and build out an intentional strategy because we have to have technology, and we also have to look to some of the programming, and that's where with Shana, we put some of the programming in based upon the client's needs, but also really let Shana drive that. So Shana, what are you seeing in the work site our employers asking more for, and how do you start that?
Yeah, I think right now there is still very much a focus on the live stream and the virtual servicing, because you're going to have this combination of people still working from home and those coming into the office, and everybody having different schedules as well. So being able to provide, one thing doesn't serve everyone. So for programming that, I've been providing, like I said, live stream classes and workshops, and really fundamental to giving people the tools to bring fitness and movement into their everyday life. So it's not about kind of the traditional class where it's, we're all going to do jumping jacks now. It's really about talking about different movements, things that you can do to see opportunities in your everyday life. So, Dr. Matt was talking about the 30 minutes a day, and that is important, but you can also, start where you are with little bits and put it throughout your day, because it really is about movement. Because even if we get those 30 minutes, but we're sitting the rest of the time, that can be a challenge. So, and not great for our bodies. So, like I said, live stream, also the workshops, the classes. We are open to doing things in person. But also one thing I'd like to mention are the mindful motivations, which are text messages that we do that's pretty unique from other programs. And this gives people that kind of one-on-one attention. They can respond back, but they're also just nice little reminders about things that you can bring, like I said, into your everyday, like drinking water, which I'll remind everyone to do right now. When was the last time you had a little sip?
Thank you. Last question. When we look, the question that came in is market research, this is a statement, market research is expensive, and while I'd like to learn more about my employees and what they want, I don't think the owner will spend the money. Michael, what simple options might Great Blue suggest?
Well, first off, market research doesn't have to be expensive, and I think that is, we're one of the few industries, thanks to technology and efficiencies in our world, we are one of the few industries that has continued to get less expensive over the last 10 years. So there are some DIY type programs. We actually help create some DIY programs for folks where they'll hire us out on kind of an hourly rate to help set up their program, and we can do it all the way through. The reality is even informal conversations with your employees can work, right? If you're a large organization, you probably want to do that. I think importantly, even if you're just having those, kind of informal conversations, there are folks that are not sharing what they're really feeling out of that fear of what's going to happen. So when you get into a situation where there is confidentiality and you can do it with an independent research firm, that's where you're really going to get the most information and the most honest information from your folks.
Wonderful. So we appreciate everyone coming today. I want to personally thank our sponsors, Great Blue Research, McKearney Associates, Zag Interactive, all companies that are in our business center here that Michael's created with Zag at 20 Western Boulevard in Glastonbury, Connecticut. I also want to thank our presenters. I want to thank Michael, Shana, Doug, and Dr. Castano. And I definitely want to thank you for tuning in today. Thanks for your leadership and engaging this conversation. We very much look forward to sharing this information with you. We're going to post the video. And with that said, I hope everyone has a great weekend, and thanks for tuning in. And don't be too crafty on your April Fool's jokes. Thank you.